Welcome to Malik's Wizard Reviews. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that voice the entire time. The first recording I did today nearly killed it, so I'm just going to go with regular Malik voice. All right. So what am I doing? What do I have you here for? I'm reviewing Birth Death Robots. Gonna go through them. Gonna go talk about them. Talk about each of the shorts. Rank them all. Just kind of I want to be able to feel out how I feel about them through this video. So I'm gonna be kind of probably pausing to just sort of think about things a good deal. So if you want to put it to 2 times speed, I would highly recommend doing that. I would highly recommend listening to these videos at high speeds. I would highly recommend listening to all videos at really high speeds, but mine in particular. So anyway, Birth Death Robots, new Netflix series. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it. If you want to go in, this is going to be a super spoiler heavy discussion. I'm going to go into every little detail that I remember and am fond of, so that's going to involve lots and lots of spoilers. I'd recommend watching all of these. Obviously, I have my favorites because I am going to be ranking them in a list, but really, bottom of the barrel, still a 5 or a 6 out of 10. I don't think there was anything that was genuinely bad, especially on a second viewing, because a couple of them I've viewed twice just to double check what I was thinking about giving them on the tiered list. So yeah, I would recommend the entire series. It's kind of a gritty, very very edgy, lot of sci-fi, some fantasy, some fantasy sci-fi. Good little mix. I think one thing that the first 12 takes of this video that I totally passed up on is I think what this is, and what's really important about this series, and probably one of the reasons why I'm reviewing it and trying to say, hey, go watch the series, is that I have a lot of my friends and a lot of even family members have been saying hey, why does Japan get all of the really wacky fucked up stuff? Why do they get crazy hardcore, just PG-13, R-rated, triple X rated cartoons, while the West gets diddly? We get DreamWorks adaptations of Madagascar's Penguins and season 2 of DreamWorks Madagascar Penguins, but not a lot else. Those are the only 2 shows. Those are the only 2 shows that the Western market has been getting that are remotely adult. Everything else is for kids. So to finally have another series besides DreamWorks Madagascar Penguins kind of go in this really kind of edgy direction, it's nice. It's nice to finally have another series do it, and especially a series that because it's an anthology series, and it is an anthology series. Probably should have mentioned that earlier, but honestly, I assume you probably already know a little bit about the series because you're watching a big review of it. So I'm going in assuming it's an anthology series on Netflix. Yeah. So anyway, R-rated, edgy, experimental. There's a lot of variety because it's an anthology, and there's a lot of variety in style. So there's way more experimentation than you'd ever get from just a serialized, traditional, animated TV show. Or I guess internet show. I don't know. Do you still call it TV now that it's on the internet? It's a question for another time. I'm talking about Birth Death Robots right now. Or at least I'm trying to. So, it's finally a taste of, hey, we've got serious, kind of edgy, experimental, adult media that's asking a lot of weird questions. Not a lot of crazy new questions. I will admit that none of the series was like mind-blowing. I think probably the top two still cap out at around like an 8 or 9 out of 10 for me. Still a really strong recommendation, but I think I'm more excited for this series because what it means for the future. And I do think it means a lot for the future. I think this is a good, like, this is the foot in the door of where are we going to get, or when are we going to get, like, more kind of edgy, like, animated media. Because you can do so much more with animation, as this series shows. And so, without further ado, I will begin to rank them from least favorite to favorite. Number 1. Pew! Shapeshifter. I mean, number 18. That's my least favorite, if that isn't obvious. It's not bad. I like the idea. I like the fundamental idea, because it's basically American Werewolf in Afghanistan. That's the premise here. You've got werewolves contracted by the United States government to hunt down the Taliban, and turns out the Taliban is hiring werewolves too. Interesting premise. Honestly, the execution for that premise was about as good as you would expect. Like, the characterization was interesting. I really liked the friendship between, like, the main two werewolf characters, like the protagonist and his best buddy from back home. Definitely had, like, this really nice sort of wolf out of the woods type vibe for how, like, alienated they felt in it. The sort of drive to kind of prove yourself to others, like, only to kind of realize that you don't really have to go out of your way to do that. You can sort of become your own thing. Those are the sort of themes that I really picked up on in it, and honestly kind of resonated with, as I'm a guy reviewing a series in a novelty wizard costume. So the basic idea, kind of neat. Execution, so. Mostly, I think, honestly, a lot of it is, I feel like a lot of CG, a lot of these CG, like, one of the main problems I have, and you'll probably be able to tell this based on, like, how I've kind of ordered these, is a lot of them tend to try and shoot for, like, a realistic style, and thankfully not all, which is one of the things that, like, really draws me. Like, I think of my top 5, one I would say goes for, like, a hyper realistic look. Maybe another one kind of, but it's sort of it sort of has its own sort of stylistic decisions, kind of, like, elevating it, in my opinion. But basically, the majority of the top 5 are all, like, they really experiment with, like, the CG, like, way more than Shapeshifter did, which kind of tries to go for, like, the super gritty, super realistic. Like, it feel like, honestly, some of the shots, like, you can, like, sort of, like, squint, and it's like, oh, those almost look like actual people. And on that regard, really impressive. I actually don't even think it's, like, the best for that. A couple of those come later, but, like, of the ones that shoot for that really realistic style, they do, I feel, do, like, a fairly good job. I think of those, though, Shapeshifter is, like, the weaker one. Number 17 is Blind Spot, which actually doesn't go for a realistic style at all. If I were to describe it, I would say something akin to there's like an episode. No. There's like an episode of Reboot where they're going, like, on a race thing. Yeah, okay, kind of like Ghost in the Shell meets Sly Cooper. I think that's how I would describe it. It's a very cyberpunk, like heist style, like kind of cartoony, but obviously since it's like rated R, I believe it's rated R. Maybe a little. Maybe it's even rated X because there's a lot of nudity in some of these episodes. I will tell you that right up front. They can get away with like a lot more raunchiness, a lot more like craziness. Still, none of the characters really like jived well with me, and I, with Blind Spot in particular, I guess one problem I always have with, and this might feel honestly a little nitpicky. One of the problems I always have with characters that are supposed to be like the newbies on the job is that they serve as like an audience surrogate to like allow people to kind of go in not knowing quite what's going on. Like it lets you be blind. It lets you basically ask questions through like observing this character and how he interacts with the world. But one of my problems with that is when you have this disconnect where the character doesn't know things that reasonably like he should know, and that the characters in universe even lambast him for not knowing, which kind of like further like made the entire scenario a bit goofy. But so basically, because this is an anthology series and because they can kind of get away with like killing off all the characters if they want to, because it's just a one and done thing, pretty much 3 out of the 4 people on this like particular heist end up like getting absolutely brutally murdered by different like robots and constructions. And so the rookie, the new guy on the job is like horrified at this. He manages to just barely like survive all of this like bedlam and chaos that's going down, and only to find in the end that his 3 like new companions are still alive and have been digitally backed up because they're all cyborgs and they all have digital brains. But like, I guess again, I will freely admit this is super nitpicky. I don't like I don't know why he wouldn't know that. And the characters even say like, "Oh yeah, you should have read your contract. We all get digital backups, dude. We're all fine." And it's like, I mean, like they didn't even have to do that, really. I don't know. That one just kind of felt weak. Like the actual art style, none of the designs really did much of anything for me. They were very very samey. I liked some of the banter a good deal. I loved the super like toilet humor. I love the one of the last robots to get killed gets his head like crushed like by one of the evil robots. And so he like falls to the ground and is destroyed. And he's like this big kind of cigar lighting like sort of crazy hero type like rebel robot. So it's and like this is the one that like most like shatters the will of the hero, and he's like the protagonist, and he's about to be destroyed by this robot. And then it turns out that he's not dead, because even though his head's destroyed, it turns out his brain is housed inside of his ass, and the shot zooms in on his robot ass, and it looks like he's pissing on the core at the front of this large convoy that they're hijacking, because like there's fuel flying out of his like neck hole and like lining up so that it like looks like a piss stream coming out from behind this like little sign that literally says like brain here right on his ass. And then he like uses his little thumb lighter to light the fuse up and blows the whole front of the convoy up. I love that bit. That was actually probably the highlight. It was such like goofy, over the top, raunchy humor. Exactly the kind of thing I would love to see in one of those types of shows. Because it really did kind of feel. It gave me some flavors of Reboot. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that old series. I think I was even going to bring that up earlier. kind of Sly Cooper-y, very, very cartoonish in nature. So if you like Sly Cooper, if you liked the reboot, you're probably gonna like this, because it's basically that but raunchy. I thought it was okay. It was like 5, 6 out of 10, somewhere in that ballpark. I've talked about this one enough though. 16, Suits. This one, like, it didn't really do it for me. It kind of was like a Hawken. It was like a little mech sort of series. It was like farmers having like a giant robot fight against a bunch of pests. Like the premise was cute. The execution was like kind of nice. It was just all around just kind of okay. I think one of my problems was that it delved very heavily into the, oh my gosh, this character, is he gonna leave, or are they gonna stay and help save the day? And then every time it's like, oh, they stayed and helped save the day. And I do like that in like, functionally, I do like characters like questioning that and like you not knowing for sure when, but I feel like they lean far too heavily on that particular deal, where I think like the general feel of the episode, like it almost felt like that was so out of the question that like it shouldn't have been questioned, because I never once, like even from the very beginning, like the first time a character is like said to like, maybe like it's like they're gonna run away, like I never believed it, because like all of the characters, they have like really good banter. They're really clearly like kind of nippy, kind of rival neighbor types, like very close friends, like old pal types. So you never for like a moment think that, oh yeah, these people are totally gonna run and abandon all their friends to die. That's a thing that's definitely gonna happen. But no, that's never gonna happen. So like, I guess my problem is like, why even dwell on that as a possibility? Why not just sort of lean more heavily into these people, they have formed a sort of large, like, or not a large, but like a small, like really tight-knit community. I don't know. That it could have been a lot better. I feel like, again, that one particular nitpicky reason is the main thing that kind of drags it down a good deal for me. But again, that one I'd probably rank like 6 or 7. I think like really, really Blind Spot and Shapeshifter, the only ones I would rank below a 7. I would give them like a 6 or a 5 even. Suits onward, we're talking 7 and up, baby. 7 and up. We are solid gold from here on out. I would recommend the entire series, but if you respect me at all, you will watch every episode except maybe Blind Spot and Shapeshifter, but probably give those a watch too, because you might like them. I've dwelled too long on Suits as well. The Dump. The Dump felt like it felt like they took number 15. Forgot. I gotta do this. There we go. New image. It felt like a very edgy reboot of Up. That's like about the pitch I'd give. If you liked Up at all, and you wanted to see Up if the small boy was a giant monster made out of garbage that devoured all that stood in Carl, I believe his name was, his way, in Up, then watch The Dump, because in The Dump you have like this guy trying to live on his property and sort of like I think like to dip into the theme some, like he ends up befriending this monster composed entirely of the garbage and detritus and even like life forms that like have accumulated inside of this dump that he lives in. And so to that end, I believe like one of the themes is like we are in some way made of the environment that we come to be a part of. That is what he's defending when he wants to remain in the dump, is that like this is a place that made him who he is. And to like sort of further elucidate on that theme, the monster that becomes his ally is a creature that is literally composed entirely out of the environment that he happens to find himself in, that the creature and this protagonist happens to find them, like they both find themselves in. So to that end, I think it really dips into the theme of, hey, you are in part made of the place where you are at. It informs who you are. And in the case of the monster, it literally makes you up. In the case of the protagonist, like what he's defending is this like right to continue to be remade by this place that is making him, and to like a literal extent this monster. But yeah, that's The Dump. I'd recommend that one. Here we go. Number 14. Number 14. Boop. Sunny's Edge. I honestly, like, I don't even really have like a complaint or like a nitpick about this one. Like I don't even think like honestly I have like much of a complaint about any of these onward. Like even The Dump, like I didn't really like complain a lot about. I think like like I said, after this, like it's really just here we go. Sunny's Edge, really good sort of parable about how like the damage that like you accrue in your past kind of makes you who you are. Very, very similar to The Dump in that respect, but a lot more focused on experience rather than environment. Although like obviously the environment plays some part into going through what they might have gone through, since it does sort of there is that like kind of opening pan in the like showing like the really beautiful section of the city, and then like it shows like this really kind of rundown section where these gladiatorial arenas are, and you follow this team who are like bringing out this big freaking lizard, right? They're bringing a big lizard, gonna fight a big rock monster. The monsters are controlled by these users who are kind of jacked in using like mind jack things. It's kind of a wrestling parable. The boss wants to fix the competition because this is like the up and coming team that's being followed by the narrative. They're coming in to win it. They don't want to screw around and play games. They don't want to like play shadow politics and shadow economics. They want a good, honest fight, damn it, and they'll have one. And they get one, and they win. And it's really cool. It's like generally like I don't even think I've like honestly like gone into this, but I don't even think like there's any that like all of the action sequences in all of these are, each of them are just very inventive and very fun. Sunny's Edge, no exception. A very fun gladiatorial fight. Followed up by a twist that the person who wanted to fix the fight sends his sort of like femme fatale in to sort of seduce and murder the leader of the team, so that this rival team can't pose as much of a threat to the hierarchy he's established in the fighting rings. So this happens, and The murder does not go well because it turns out that the protagonist, this one woman who's badly scarred on her face, was already murdered. And in order to save her, they loaded her brain into the creature that she has been mind-jacked into. So that's one thing that I love about this series, is that because it's short films, and I with short films in general, what you're invited to do is establish a premise and then immediately sort of play with that premise. And in this particular case, like you've got the interesting like premise of this is a world where monsters are controlled by people and are like fight to the death while they're under people's control. It then takes that one step further in the narrative by like literally loading someone entirely into one of these creatures so that they might survive the damage that is done to them. And again, I think this dips into a theme of like you are made somewhat by the damage that you like accrue in your life. You are composed of scar tissue, and in this particular case, like the scars that this character bears have turned her into this like massive alligator woman. A little attractive. 13. I'm gonna 13. Pow! Lucky 13. I did just put it there because of the number. Sue me. It's actually, funnily enough, a reference to the narrative itself, because the ship in that particular narrative begins with 13, ends with 13. So, 13, Lucky 13. That is where I am ranking Lucky 13. I liked it. Good action sequence. A nice little story about I think like what it really touches on nicely is how one kind of like overcoming a bad like a stigma of some kind, because the ship is considered cursed, and she manages to the protagonist manages to fly like a number of very successful missions on it, and the like Lucky 13, which was originally the ship had been branded Lucky 13 as an ironic, sardonic moniker. It was not lucky to be assigned to that particular ship as a space marine. But it actually manages to become sincere when she manages to successfully maintain a 0 casualty rate over many missions. I feel like one complaint was I feel like it was setting up more of a potential narrative akin to I'd say it probably doesn't hold up particularly well, but there's a film that came out in around 2005 called Stealth. It was all about an artificial intelligence loaded inside of a fighter jet, sort of befriending the protagonists. I felt like one of the drafts of that script probably touched on that idea a little bit more, because there are frequent shots from the AI looking at the protagonist. It's very clear that the protagonist is forming a bond with this ship, and it's implied that the ship is forming a bond with this protagonist ever so slightly, but I feel like I would have liked to see that touched upon more. As far as visuals go, I would like to remark on this one too, because I think this one, for me, as far as I'm aware, it's one of the ones that goes for the more realistic take, which is one of the reasons why it's kind of lower down. Probably the second or third most realistic looking one. Probably second, I would say. And really the one I would put as first most realistic, kind of cheating because it's doing I'll get to that later. So in terms of most realistic and not cheating, or not, I guess cheating is kind of a dirty word to say. in this particular case, because I don't think it's cheating, the one that I'm talking about. Well, wait. Maybe it's cheating. You know what? No, I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna just say Lucky 13 for me, probably like number 2 most realistic one. Most realistic, like most realistic, like double realistic, I would say is because I'm gonna go ahead and move on to number 12. I don't have a lot to say about Lucky 13. It's nice, really good fighting scenes, like a really good kind of sci-fi action sequence in general. Whew, getting parched. It's good frog water. So anyway, Lucky 13, pretty good, pretty realistic, nice action one. Good, like a good action heavy episode. 12, Secret War. Another really good action one. Like that is Secret War. Pow. Most realistic, I would say. Most realistic. It follows a group of Russians during World War II fighting like these demons summoned from a mission from long ago by the secret police in the USSR to sort of summon a demon, like an army from hell, to kind of fight. And it turns out that didn't go so well. Who'd have thought? So these guys are sent in to kind of try to clean up some of this, and it does not go too well. There's like kind of a father-son narrative going on that I feel like wasn't touched on quite as much as it could have been. I'm trying to think of like more to say about it, really. Besides, I feel like I'm going to be a little nitpicky about this one. Oh, I will say, there are like 2 scenes, because the whole episode looks really great, like really intense, really gory, really gritty. There are some scenes in there. There's like 2 scenes where they're traveling, and like and one of the horses that they're riding on like kind of falls down the cliff while there's this massive blizzard hitting them, and like I think it's either silent for the most part, or there's like a narration going over it that's very somber. And honestly, one of like you see these 2 soldiers like frantically holding onto this horse, and because like it already looked great, the blizzard helps like further hide what few imperfections there are. One of the most like hauntingly realistic shots in the entire series. So for that alone, like I would highly recommend Secret War. There's like 2 or 3 seconds that are like genuinely like just burned into my brain, like very, very visually intense. Like another scene that was really great. Like at the very end, they just managed to call in a bomber squadron to come in and wipe out all of these critters, all of these dangerous critters that are running around this big hive thing that got detonated. There's like this really nice kind of melancholic, like sort of folksy music playing, I believe, while like bombs are starting to drop. Like you can't hear any of the bombs, so it's like one of those really like messed up kind of like discordant, like the audio is not matching up. It's like contrasting super heavily with the visuals, which is something I love. And I would have loved it more in here, but they cut it way too short. Like it's like you get maybe like 4 or 5, like maybe 5 or 6 seconds of this at most, of like this kind of really discordant, like nice relaxing music, while like bombs are like just dropping on these like hell creatures. And I would have loved to, like, I know it would have been crazy hard because that was probably like another really elaborate scene. Like I feel like I'd almost go out on a limb and say that was a shot that they had planned to make longer, but because of crunch times, they probably had to roll that one out, like without fully finishing it. I don't know. Maybe they did think that was like enough, because it does like send the point home that like this is kind of it almost, because what it does is it like kind of makes that as like, oh, this is just business as usual now. It's back to normal. The problem is resolved. The normal world has sort of begun to sort of reclaim this particular nightmare. So yeah, Secret War, firm recommendation. 11, alternate histories. It's like a kind of, oh wait, hold on. Did that work? All right, there we go. Okay. 11, alternate histories. So, with alternate histories, you've got a program that lets you go back and see what would happen in the future, if like Hitler died in 6 different ways. Not like the animation style right off the bat, like one of the more cartoony ones that I've like put on the list so far. The idea is interesting. I feel like one of the like best, most absurd parts about it is that like basically all 6 of the deaths that they put Hitler through are like within like seconds of one another in like this small like time period. And each one of them, because he dies at like a very slightly different time in a slightly different way, or I guess like maybe not a slightly different way, in potentially an absurdly different way, because each death kind of becomes more and more absurd than the last. The things get progressively stranger. Yeah, like the first couple of deaths, I think like one, he gets run over by a carriage, and then so the Germans win World War One. because he gets run over by a carriage, because Hitler gets run over by a carriage, the Germans ban horse-drawn carriages, so cars take off way quicker. And so the moon landing, which is like a kind of the moon landing becomes like a staple for how technological progress is advanced or like regresses, in relation to like the way in which Hitler dies affects the future of the world. It becomes kind of a benchmark. And in this particular case, like the moon landing happens in like, I think like the 40s or 50s by like a German guy. But yeah, that's like death number 2. I think by like death number 5, he basically dies to a set of like Serbian prostitutes who turn out to be like hot aliens from like another planet composed entirely of women who uplift like mankind and help us colonize the moon with our women. So yeah, there's a very amusing shot of literally like in the orgy with Hitler where like the women's legs make a swastika. It's so, the imagery in this one is just so patently absurd, and I haven't even gotten to the Jello cannon or the time travel war that goes on in that particular episode. One little thing I like to note at the very end, the whole Hitler playthrough, the 6 alternate timelines, is basically a demo reel to the user. The user, who I suppose is like the sort of pseudo like framing narrative protagonist in this, he decides to look up what would happen if like Abraham Lincoln shot first. So I almost would like to see that as a sequel. I feel like that premise, you could go pretty much anywhere with it, and because of the length, which I believe is like, I want to say that one's like one of the 5 to 6 minute ones, but it might be 10 minutes. I could be wrong. That one in particular, like I feel like you could probably play with the most in terms of like having like a sequel, because you could literally just mess with like any historical figure in a similar premise. in a similarly absurd way, and that would probably be pretty entertaining. So yeah, that one, alternate histories, a lot of fun. Number 10. We're getting into the top 10s now. The top 10s. Can you hear me? It's top 10s. Number 10, Helping Hand. Have you ever seen Gravity? You should watch Gravity. Have you ever seen 127 Hours? I haven't seen 127 Hours, but I know it's about a guy who chops his arm off. Helping Hand is if Gravity... If Sandra Bullock had to... I think Sandra Bullock is the protagonist from Gravity. I'm pretty sure she is. Basically, it's Helping Hand is an astronaut survival flick, like a short astronaut survival flick, about an astronaut who has to get back to the space station with like just a little bit of momentum. So she needs to find something to throw. The one thing she finds to throw is the glove on her suit, which she manages to like kind of tourniquet off and toss. Then she misses. So her arm begins to freeze. And, well, let's just say in 127 hours, James Franco playing the, I think it was James Franco who played in that movie. James Franco has to cut off his arm to save himself. So I'm just gonna put that idea that this is similar to 127 hours in your head, and the episode is called Helping Hand. So I'm just gonna put that out there that sometimes sacrifices to the great nothing have to be made in order for you to survive, and in this particular case, a pretty gruesome sacrifice had to be made. Pretty powerful. I don't know if they totally sold the pain, but like that's a minor nitpick. I mean, I can't, like, what are you gonna compare that to? Like, how are you gonna like really like realistically sell? I guess I've been spoiled for all of these. How are you realistically gonna sell like pulling off your own arm in space? Like that's like a hard sell for like any actor or actress. So I don't know like how I can even say like they could have done better in that particular case, because I really don't know how they could have, because that was done about as good as it could have been done. So Helping Hand, very visceral, very painful to watch, pretty good. And speaking of good, we got number 9, Yif, the furry episode. More furry than the Shapeshifter one, because this one's got kitsunes. This one's got demon hunters in China hunting down kitsunes. Or maybe it starts in Japan and ends up in China, because I know by the end it's in Hong Kong. With this one, kind of a nice one. I think this one was in 2D, or possibly like a mix of 2D, 3D, or maybe it was like 3D made to look 2D. The narrative on this one, pretty interesting. Thematically, I liked the through line between the demon hunters of old are kind of portrayed as like misguided, and the villains of the new world are kind of portrayed as like virtually untouchable. And so what you have by the end is this sort of embrace of the monsters of the ancient age, to like, so that like one might resist and hunt down the monsters of modernity. There's kind of a, you've got like a demon hunter's lineage, like a demon hunter's child becomes an inventor. And I feel like there's an interesting through line there of someone who like fights something on like fights problems on the fringes of society, and someone who solves problems on the fringes of technology. I feel like there's a very interesting like through line there that like if I were way more well read, I could probably talk in like far more detail. But I think there's an interesting connection that's being drawn there with this particular short that I would encourage you to maybe like think about with regards to this short as you are watching it, which I hope you do. I hope you watch all of these, honestly, even the ones I didn't like that much. Number 8, Sucker of Souls. Sucker of Souls is I want to say this one's like for sure 2D. Again, I know there's some like really crazy stuff going on with like Blender in terms of like making 2D visuals, but I'm pretty sure for sure that this one in particular is 2D. This one's kind of like a very sort of Hellboy inspired kind of Dracula fight, a very monstrous interpretation of Dracula, very like perhaps Lovecraftian, but like way more action packed obviously than any of his stuff. Very horrific. This episode has the best shot I have ever seen of a man being cut entirely in half, because there is a shot in this short where you get a big old swoosh down the middle, and the skin pops off, I think the fat tissue plops off, the musculature plops off, the skeleton plops off, and you've got like a brain free floating there for like I think a split second, and then the brain like fucking splits in half and flies everywhere, and then blood just starts gushing like crazy. It is so over the top that shot alone probably bumped it up like several points on this list, honestly, just because that was that was easily one of the most over-the-top and dramatically intense kills I have seen in an animated anything in forever. So that one stands out quite a bit in that respect. Themes-wise, not a lot to really say. You got like kind of a mercenary team sort of bantering back and forth, working together. Maybe there's something about like... Well, obviously there's something about investigating things you might not want to investigate. That's where I kind of bring in the Lovecraft elements or references, because I do feel like it kind of embraces that, like, there are some things man was not meant to poke at. There are some doors we were not meant to knock upon because they bite. Those doors can bite. Speaking of biting, number 7. Bing. Fish Night. Fish Night is fish nice. I quite liked this one. It was a lot of fun. The premise is you get a couple of salesmen, door-to-door salesman types, driving through the deep old desert. Car breaks down. They're stuck. There's kind of an argument that the younger salesman wasn't quite paying attention enough to the radiator, and that's what ended up stranding them there. And so the older salesman kind of reacts with calm, kind of says like, just relax, stick to the shade of the car, let's chill out until nightfall, then go to bed, and then like kind of early in the morning we can go on a walk and like try to make it back before it gets too hot again. The younger salesman kind of reluctantly agrees. There's not a lot that can be done. They get to talking towards the end though, and the older salesman starts talking about like how the region that they're in, like the desert that they're in, used to be like this vast like ocean, and briefly touches on like the idea of if like people can haunt houses, why can't like animals haunt the places they once were? So why aren't there ghost fish? And wouldn't you know it, that night there are ghost fish. This is Sixth Sense meets Finding Nemo, baby. I'm gonna stand by that comparison. The basically, I've seen like webcomics kind of play with this premise, the idea of like large fish, like kind of swimming through the ocean. I think it was an Oglaf comic, actually. I think there was an Oglaf comic that touched on the idea of, because like so many places used to be completely underwater, the ghosts of these fish like haunt the world. I mean, this is actually almost like an adaptation of that Oglaf comic, which frankly is a bit hilarious. There is I think something being touched on, though, because in the discussion between the younger salesman and the older salesman, the younger salesman, and I feel like they don't portray this particularly well because of how angry he gets like towards the beginning of their problem, but the older salesman basically says like, you just can't sell things anymore. It's like the day of the traveling salesman's done. And the younger salesman, a little more positive, a little more upbeat about that particular issue, says like, you got the right attitude, you could sell almost anything. And so the ghost fish arrive, and both salesmen are very interested in this particular thing, in like these like strange ethereal fish kind of swimming all around. The younger salesman like far more so than the older one. The older one's like a little more wary about kind of jumping into these dangerous waters, and so the younger salesman totally rambunctiously sort of kind of has one sort of like weird looking anglerfish kind of swim through him, and is like, oh man, so maybe kind of an eel swim through him. He's like, oh man, this is cool. I'm gonna go see if I can swim with these weird freaking ghost fishes. So he jumps up into the air, starts swimming with these ghost fishes, and wouldn't you know it, he can't hear the old salesman saying, hey, you dumb idiot, you're about to get eaten by a ghost shark. A ghost of a shark is gonna eat your newly ghost-fished ghost ass. And so the ghost shark does eat his ghost-fished ghost ass. Yeah. Totally devours the young salesman, who I believe at that point has been converted into a fish soul of some kind. I think the parable there, which I actually don't agree with, but I think like the visuals kind of pull it this high up. I think the narrative is almost a kind of like, be careful about your optimism sort of deal, which I can respect to a certain degree. I definitely think obviously the young salesman in this particular situation was exceptionally reckless, and like with the radiator, like through being like just sort of assuming things would be okay, possibly. I think it's kind of implied because of his attitude and because of how things ended up for him, that he didn't bother checking that radiator because he just sort of had sort of an excessively positive attitude to a detriment. So the narrative then is kind of a warning against that sort of attitude, to not be so positive that you don't notice the threats that are coming for you. Which actually, like, saying out loud, I can definitely respect to that particular warning, to not be so clouded with positivity that you don't notice the gigantic red ghost sharks coming right behind you. Oh my gosh, it's gonna get you, because you're also in a ghost ocean, the ghost of an ocean. I think what I'm gonna do, since that's since I've got like 6 more here, and I'm probably gonna talk about these in like a little more depth, I think I'm gonna break it up here, because this has probably gone on for about an hour, and I don't want to take up your entire day. So I'm gonna go ahead and put pause on this. And I will see you again in part 2.